Welcome to the Infidel, podcast of the damned, the weekly companion show of the Infidel News. Join us as we discuss this week's religious accounts from an atheist perspective. From Timbuktu to Toledo, from Kathmandu to Canada, from Bangalore to Bangladesh. We deplore, you deride. And here are your hosts, Dave and Nicole.
Hello and welcome to show number 40 of the Infidel podcast of the damned. We're back. I'm your host, atheist and author J. David Core, and with me is my co-host, Nicole Samard. Hello, Nicole.
Howdy there. I'm back, but I'm not all there.
That's right. Also joining us today is Eric Thomas of Humanist Canada. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Dave. Hello, David. Hello, Nicole.
Today is Wednesday, March 23rd, 2016, and we're going to be discussing the upcoming episodes of the Infidel News, which will run beginning Monday, March 28th, 2016. Today's newsreader is the Mudbrooker. Show notes for all of our podcasts can be found at infidelpodcast.blogspot.com. And as I mentioned, we're back because we were gone. We've been gone since November. We took a little bit longer hiatus than we anticipated. But we're back now, and as I said, joining us today, even though he's only here in static image for the video, is Eric Thomas. And Eric, tell us a little bit about Humanist Canada.
Thank you very much, David. Humanist Canada is the national organization here in Canada. We have membership across the country from Victoria right through to Newfoundland. But as a national organization, we don't have a lot of in-person meetings with each other. We do most of our group meetings. The local groups hold their own meetings, and indeed, they each have their own independent type of mandate. And the national group is wise enough to leave them alone, usually because they're smarter than us. So I've been president for about a year and a half. I'm also president of a local association here in Eastern Ontario, Quinte Secular Humanist Association. I also serve on the board of directors of Secular Ontario here in Ontario as a secretary, actually. We're also signatories, Humanist Canada is, to the International Coalition Against Blasphemy Law, a coalition put together by the IHEU out of London, and also co-signatory with CFI out of Toronto. Also, the other thing I'd like to mention is that Humanist Canada is the exclusive sponsor of the Imagine No Religion conference in British Columbia this year, with James Randi as a guest, AC Grayling, Michael Shermer, Julia Sweeney, etc. So that's kind of where we're coming from. But as I said, as a national group, we're sharing ideas, thoughts, etc. with humanists across the country and promoting, fostering efforts all the way across the country in a number of different areas. And not the least of which, of course, is the Catholic school system here in Ontario.
Mm-hmm. Yep, there's a little bit of a situation going on right now that you're trying to remedy.
There is. Perhaps I can chat about that for a second?
Yeah, go right ahead.
The Catholic school system in Ontario is a vestige of history, the cultural history. It's been around for 100 or so years, but is no longer representative of the demographic in Ontario or indeed across the country. It's also an issue, by the way, in Alberta, who have even more poignant concerns. But here in Ontario, it's been active since about 1994. The original book, and literally it was a book written on what should be happening, was written by Renton Patterson of CRIPE, Civil Rights in Public Education. But so it's been an ongoing thing for about 20 years, but it's become more and more in the public sphere in the last year or two for a number of interesting reasons, not the least of which is $1 billion boondoggle. I think that's what they call things like that. It's over $1 billion a year, and I think Ontario could probably well use the money. But the organization started in 1994, was taken to the United Nations in 1998 by Henry Beisel, a famous poet out of Concordia University. And the United Nations ruled in 1998 that having a separate school system for a minor portion of the population was an actual violation of civil rights. They confirmed that ruling, and so Ontario/Canada is standing in violation of a ruling by the United Nations, and that's that big ass place in New York. This is serious stuff. We should be embarrassed and traumatized over something like that. Today, there's some exacerbating issues that lead us to suggest that the Catholic school system should go away here in Ontario, and not the least of which is their history and the Catholic Church's history of their mandate, if you want to call it that, or their dogma around things like gender equality. The last time I looked, there wasn't a whole bunch of Catholic folks in the head positions. That's a joke.
Okay.
The man wears a skirt, but the chances of there ever being a female under that skirt are pretty much zero.
I
You
don't
take
want to
that
look
kind
under
of-
that skirt.
You don't want to. No, it's not a kilt, man. You don't want to look. But the whole point is that that's a violation of equal rights. This country and most countries in the world, well, it's certainly in North America and in most of Europe, have some stuff called gender equality. Not so much in the Catholic school system or the Catholic Church. We'll add to that the LGBTQ community's issues with the Catholic school system, and they're rampant here in Ontario. They have been trounced. They have a smoke screen that they put up, but the bottom line is they're not welcome. They're not welcome in church. They're not welcome in the hierarchy of the Catholic school system or the Catholic Church, and that's a travesty. Those are basic human rights, basic civil rights that we in Canada cherish. The other thing I'd like to add is, and I've made some notes here, is that the percentage of Catholics, of course, in the province of Ontario has declined, obviously, since this legislation was introduced. The initial 1800s demographic split was probably Catholic, Protestant, and there was 2 atheists and an agnostic somewhere in Moosonee, and that was about it. So that vestige of cultural history is legitimate. But you know what? It's not the case anymore.
Right.
The last time
goes on.
It really does. The last time the long-form census was done, we secular humanist types were somewhere near 27%. And that was in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. The conservatives kind of did away with that reality check.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're 35, 45%. We're as many as the other folks, and in a lot of cases, way ahead of things like the Catholic percentage. So that sense of entitlement, which is a vestige of cultural history, is legitimate 150 years ago. Not so much anymore. It's just not.
Just to bring a little bit of history in all this, it's something that most people in Canada are not aware of. And people outside of Canada absolutely have no idea where that comes from, obviously. It goes back to 1763 when England took over Canada. Actually, it was in 58 that the Battle of the Plains of Abraham took place, but it's officially in 63 that England took over Canada. And what happened then is the main difference between an English and a Catholic person, and an English person, except for the language itself, was the religion. Everybody who was English was an Anglican, and everybody who was French was a Catholic. Now, what happened is when the British first took over, they decided that they were going to make the Catholic institutions illegal. And that caused a problem for French people because all their institutions were French, including among those were Catholic. Included among those institutions were the schools. Not that they had that many schools in 1763, but all the schools were Catholic. So making Catholic institutions illegal amounted to making French schools illegal. So French people went over to the Supreme Court of England and got the Supreme Court to rule in their favor that they had a right to their own schools. Then came Canada, the actual BNA Act back in 1867, and then what came afterwards, the immigration of the Irish, who were also Catholic, and allowing Catholic schools, which was originally meant to be allowing French schools, because there was a whole bunch of Irish people in Ontario, for example, and they
who didn't
very
speak
quickly
French.
outnumbered the French, then what was meant to be French institutions became an English institution and Catholic only. And that's why back in the 1920s, at one point, it became illegal to teach in French in Ontario. And it was a law that was called Article 27, I believe, or Article 17, something like that. And it became illegal to teach in French. And that was overturned in the 30s or in the late 20s. And now we are stuck with, a stupid old law that had, or stupid old rights that were supposedly based for languages, and now it's based on religion.
Either
that's
way.
My story.
Yeah, but Nicole, I think you make a good point, is that when I hear the term 1700, it makes me shudder. Not even I am that old.
You're not?
No,
Looking
this
at
is
that
a
picture
travesty.
and missing hair that you're hiding with the glasses.
Yeah.
It's a travesty that's even considered.
Yeah, the subtitle on this show is going to be Three Old White Guys.
I think we fit the bill.
Yeah.
So let's get rid of it. The bottom line is we need to get rid of it. There's been a number of polls taken recently, and I won't go on ad nauseum about the Ontario government's request for input on their recent budget, which was a sham, by the way. But the polls mathematically suggested that most of Ontario supports the elimination, the amalgamation of the Catholic school system, of a separate school system. And as if we remember, there was an election not that long ago where the Conservative gentleman suggested we should have a separate school system for every religion. Well, that was not a good thing.
That would be fun.
Well, sure it would, and it's a ridiculous proposition, and didn't fly and got him unelected. So that's a good thing, because it was ridiculous.
One of the other things that your group is involved in, as I understand, is also informing people of their right not to attend compulsory religion.
It is, and that's a slam dunk. The 10% of the Catholic school education is religion class. There are 27 credits required to graduate from high school in Ontario. The Catholic school system interjects 4. They're optional credits in the public school system. In the Catholic school system, 4, which is 1 a year, by the way, is religion of some variety, religion class of some variety, under the guise of comparative religion, under the guise of, I don't know really, but that's 10. That's 10%. It's over 10% of a child's education is on religion. The case was made about a year and a half ago, perhaps 2 years ago. A gentleman's son was having a future of engineering, and he had very poor mathematics grades, and thought, gee, you know what? I got to bone up on this. I got to take some more math because I need this, and I really don't need the religion one. The gentleman's father went to court, went to Ontario court, and said, I got to do this. My son's going to this school. He's not even a Catholic, as it turns out, and he wants to take mathematics, not religion. And the court said, okay, that's fine. He can do that. So there's no obligation to take these courses. The lying that goes on is that you must take this course if you're going to get a graduation certificate from us. No, you don't. It's not necessary. myexemption.com explains in very simple terms it's not a requirement. It's not, and even religious affiliation is not a condition of enrollment in the Catholic school. So this is a sham. It's not necessary. So what Secular Ontario in particular has done is created a great coupon called Get Out of Religion Class Free. Looks an awful lot like something from Monopoly. Mm-hmm. A year ago, I stood in a 20 below degree morning, took this coupon on essentially I think it's about 4x8, nicely colored, and it looks like a Monopoly money. And we handed them out on the streets of Kingston. Very successfully, we handed them out in the streets of outside a high school in Ottawa with 4 of our members, including Henry Beisel, the president of Secular Ontario, and a lawyer and another member. The children took it. Said, cool. The school had been forewarned that we were going to do it. They called the police, and they had a constable sitting there in case we humanist types created a lot of ruckus. And in this case, there was 3 old white men and 1 old white lady.
Yeah.
At 25
well, the last thing kids need is indoctrination of some sort from atheists.
You know what, David? We barely met, and I'm going to get excited because the indoctrination of children should be illegal.
Yes,
I don't think it'll happen in my lifetime, but somebody should take religions to court and sue them, have the laws changed. When you delude young minds, there's a marketing thrust by assorted churches, including the Catholic one, that says, "Give me a child as a church-going person," and guess what? They're going to be going to my church forever. Mm-hmm. That should be illegal. That to me is mind-blowing, dogmatic indoctrination that is a travesty. I get spitting mad when I hear about that.
Right, and it's just ironic that they're so worried about the atheists handing out a coupon because they don't want their children's minds being warped when they're the ones doing it.
And I do have another comment, and that is that I gotta say the children are smarter. Mm-hmm. The children know. In this day and age, when somebody says he walked on water, he fed the fishes, the loaves and the fishes, the children are in the back row muffling into their fists with courses of bullshit. Mm-hmm. Bullshit. Mm-hmm. It's just not true. And when you tell a 5-year-old, they might believe you. When you tell a 10-year-old, they're going to say, "Just a second here. Hello, Mr. Google. Did somebody actually want virgin birth? Could you tell me about that?" Yeah. No, people aren't buying, and the children know. School children know the difference. So every time those stories, and I heard one on the news today in an advertisement for something called Easter, and when I heard it, I thought, who are you telling this to? Because nobody's buying this stuff. This is so egregiously dogma that if not today, certainly in the next generation, people are going to be shaking their heads and rolling their eyes. Come on, really? This dogmatic indoctrination it's offensive to my intelligence level, and I can prove it in like 32 seconds. Noah's Ark. Right. Really?
Although somebody did just recently find a whole bunch of fossils.
What did they on Mount Ararat?
No, it was in his backyard. Some guy in America.
Oh, the humorous question there is, and I've heard this asked in religion class. I was told, I haven't heard it. I was told that it was said, and the question in religion class was, how did the penguins know where to go when they got off the mountain in the desert thing? Right. How did they know they better hurry back to? Really?
Yeah, and what did the carnivores eat?
Sure, and how did all this work? I mean, and we almost therefore have come from those people. Like, gosh, there's an incestuous sort of thing. Mm-hmm. How did that work? And I don't know what the answer is, but
how did the sloths make it to South America?
Oh, yeah, at the speed that they move.
Are they there yet? Maybe that's where "Are We There Yet" came from.
Right.
Yeah.
Are we there yet? Is this where we're supposed to be going? No, come on. So that level of belief by the teacher, is that not embarrassing? Can you imagine the one of the three of us old white guys going out in the street and saying, okay, here's the deal. We're all from 6 people, 8 people. So your sisters, my brothers, really? How does that work? It doesn't work.
Yep. Here's another thing about the Noah's Ark thing that nobody ever seems to address is, okay, the story is set in the Middle East where there's not a lot of water, but there is some water, and there were the Phoenicians. So how did nobody else have a boat?
I never even I've not thought of that. And when you read Jared Diamond, a famous anthropological scientist, he has a story about the Noah's Ark flood. And the reality is that in that day and age, when this first, and not Noah's Ark with the Christian Abrahamic religion's version thereof, but the one that was the original story, like long before the Christian one, when it was written, Jared Diamond analyzes the world as we know it at that time. And if I'm not mistaken, it was the Tigris and the Euphrates River in Persia, which flooded quite regularly. And I'm going to guess they had a damned big one, and the world as they knew it flooded.
As they knew it, right? Mm-hmm.
Sure. Well, you know what? There's a true thing.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite the whole flippin' world. And
right.
how can you possibly, without being labeled delusional and carted away in a straitjacket, a hug yourself suit, how could you possibly tell a 5-year-old, okay, the whole world flooded? Tell it to a 10-year-old. Not going to happen. Really? No. Yeah. So the whole pretext of teaching this on an ongoing basis and protecting a school system for it, I'm thinking not. Right. That's got to stop.
Yep.
My favorite is how did the sun, how did God manage to stop the sun and not destroy the planet at the same time, when the sun was stopped in the sky for what, an hour or whatever?
Was it the sun or was it the earth? You got to get this straight for me, Nicole.
Right, yeah.
Which one stopped?
Yeah, but that's the miracle of Fatima too, is the sun went like it's whizzing through the sky. But they only saw it, it's the same sun everywhere, but they only saw it in Fatima.
Oh, okay. Well, they know that makes sense, I suppose. But, David, I guess the answer to my excitement here is just shut up and believe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I'm offended.
Yeah.
And I can have an IQ south of room temperature, and I'm still offended.
Right.
I'm not buying stuff.
We'll talk a little bit more about your organization at the end of the show, but for now, let's go ahead and move on into the stories.
Nuns host convention in Buckle of the Bible Belt. Nashville recently hosted its first Nuns Convention, or NaNoCon for short. The nuns refer to those who have no religious affiliation and are one of the fastest growing demographics in the U.S. The fact that this convention is happening in the heart of the rural South is quite significant. According to the leaders of the Tennessee secular community, it's easy for those who don't believe in God or associate with a particular religion in the Bible Belt to feel isolated. So several organizations, including the Murfreesboro Freethinkers and the Sunday Assembly in Nashville, have banded together to organize a free one-day conference in Nashville that offers non-believers and the religiously unaffiliated the chance to be among like-minded people, learn about issues, and connect with resources, said Patrick Holt, co-organizer of the event. Holt continues, when you get people together in a convention-type environment, it's really quite cathartic. It's really kind of cool for people to feel like, oh my goodness, I do belong to something. I do connect with people. There are other people like me out there, and I'm not the only one here by myself. I'm not alone. According to the Public Religion Research Institute's American Values Atlas, the number of religiously unaffiliated in the Nashville area make up 24% of the residents and constitutes a group of people who often feel overlooked and ostracized. The convention helps fill in the demand created by the growing number of nuns. Convention workshops included a broad range of topics, including how to deal with religious relatives and perfecting elevator pitches about the personal religious beliefs and ethics as a way to combat the misconception that people who don't believe in a higher power don't have anything to keep them in check.
And by the way, the two of you couldn't see it, but I put under the the poster for the conference, I put something that said, "Atheists in Tennessee, who would have thunk?"
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It's 24% of the people in Nashville, but Nashville is made up of a lot of people from outside of Tennessee because they come in for the music industry. Tennessee itself is probably not that diverse.
Interesting.
I would think.
Yeah, let's talk about Canada for a second, because we have our own buckle of the Bible Belt here, and I would call that Alberta. Alberta's, they have multiple separate school systems, but they have a very high percentage of religious folks. And as we all know, Humanist Canada respects people, belief systems, not quite so much. Mm-hmm. But people have the right to religion. We all have that right, if that's the way we're built or indoctrinated. But what's happening in Canada in this regard is that the number of secular conventions has gone exponential. Mm-hmm. There are 5 cities in Canada that hold this, and I'll give them to you because you're not going to believe where they are. There is indeed one here in Ontario called the Non-Con in Kitchener, and it's 200 to 300 people. But check this out. Last year, we attended Winnipeg. The folks at Ham in Manitoba hosted a convention. We're going on April the 30th of this year to Regina with a convention. The Reason podcast folks are holding a convention there. We were in Red Deer, Alberta last fall. A very unique experience. I attended it in person, and it was absolutely amazing. The Society of Edmonton Atheists were the hosts. Lots of Matt Delahunty out of Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken, Nathan Phelps, etc. A strong convention. And then the biggie in Vancouver, which came out of Kamloops originally, and last year went into Vancouver for the first time, the Imagine No Religion Conference. Last year, Lawrence Krauss, Humanist of the Year in the United States, and of course Richard Dawkins. Hugely successful, 358 people in some reasonably expensive seats. So think about that. That's 5 conventions, 4 of which are west of Winnipeg. Mm-hmm. Those are places that we would consider Bible belts.
Right.
So the world's changing.
Yeah, and largely because of the internet. Isn't it Dawkins who said that the internet is where people come, where religions come to die?
Absolutely. Yes, and I believe it was Dawkins, and I couldn't agree more. As I said, prove it. Really? Noah's Ark, prove it.
Ooh, somebody's got to tell Nephilim free.
Yeah.
Yes, good point, Nicole. Yes. But it seems that the interest in secular conventions is growing. People do indeed look for alternatives. And I'll share a little story with you, gentlemen. Yesterday, the 1-800 number for Humanist Canada rang. I answered the phone because it's attached to my ass, and the lady was in tears. And she said, I'm exiting a Catholic religion. I said, yes, so why are you crying? But she was crying because of Brussels. She said, why do, because she was still quite religious, she admitted, why do we do this? And by we, she means human beings. Why do we allow such violence, such fundamentalist blinders to do this? She wasn't criticizing whoever the perpetrators were. She was criticizing humanity, and she was in tears. She said, I'm looking for a resource to help. And she found our 1-800 number at the back of a book printed 25 years ago. Dawkins, The God Delusion. She said, your 1-800 number's in the back of this book. I said, oh my goodness, that's how you found me? And so I gave her local groups. There's lots, believe me. This one, she was from Montreal. There's a very active and vibrant group. We have a director from Montreal. So I gave her the numbers, and she called back today to say thank you very much. Mm-hmm. So, but for people to be crying in this day and age over something that's happened in Brussels, just it teaches the three of us something pretty significant, I think. Mm. This is real stuff. This isn't just 3 old white guys sitting around having a chat. This is the real deal. This is the real deal. Absolutely,
Which
it
is why I am so upset when I hear Republicans complaining about Obama supposedly cutting the money for the veterans. Meanwhile, they're the ones who have been pushing for cutbacks for funding for services for veterans. It's their fault. They're the ones who have done it.
I don't see where that tangent came from, but okay.
Okay. Okay.
That was an odd tangent, Nickel. But
Yeah.
you're right. But the whole situation with needing a place to come to for non-secular people, I think is part of a lot of the reason why atheism has been so slow to grow up until this point, is because religion, if nothing else, it provides community.
It does.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is so great. You guys are giving me a wonderful poster box to stand on here, my soapbox, I guess. Last fall, my vice president of Humanist Canada, Martin Frith, and I were invited to an atheist church in Scarborough, one run by Greta Vosper. We had a wonderful thing, and I actually spoke from the pulpit, as did Martin. And there was no lightning. I expected some, but there was none. It came down because I made a explanation of Humanist Canada. They were wonderful folks, and they said exactly what you have, David. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a sense of community, and afterwards, and having coffee and cookies, they asked me, so, where do we get together to sell our cookies? Right. Where do we get together to gather up scarves and mittens? You're absolutely right, David. That sense of community has 2,000 years of history, but it's so pervasive, obviously, that it's there now.
Right.
So
even today, atheists have a problem with doing things that are like selling cookies, because if you have there have been a number of times where this has been brought out. The best I've ever seen was Jacqueline Glenn, who I'm not a big fan of, but she did a video one time where she spent 2 different days holding up a sign on the same street corner asking for donations for a children's hospital. And the first day she held up a sign with a made-up church on it, and she got donations here and there, but nobody hassled her. The next day, they put up a sign that it was for American Atheists. The same street corner, the same 2 girls doing the same collection. The only difference was the sign. And they got harassed by people. People refused to donate to them. People thought it was insulting that they were even there. And then, but the people who did come, the atheists who did come, were so glad to finally have a place to donate that they raised more money the second day.
Yes. And that's a good point. But it surrounds the religious marketing bent, which has got about 2,000 years of experience. The whole function of atheists being such bad folks has 2,000 years of marketing behind it. And the reality for us, secular types, us, the 3 of us in particular, is that we need to go beyond that marketing. We need to go beyond the label as atheists, because I'm often asked, you're kind of a nice guy, you're a humanist, you're a secular humanist. That's pretty cool, man. I like you. You're not an atheist, are you?
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, afraid so. Oh, well, then I hate your guts.
Yeah.
So wait a minute here. I'm the same guy.
Yeah.
I just happen to be an atheist as well as a secular humanist. So we've got some brand recognition work to do, I'm afraid.
Right.
And I'm going to make a couple of steps back because you mentioned Greta and her United Church where you've been to.
Yes,
and I want to announce to everybody that she will be a guest on our show very soon.
Oh, wonderful.
Cool.
Greta recently brought us a new group, which she has, and her congregation, and I think they are called a congregation, called the Oasis Project in the United States. And I'll leave it to her to talk about it, but it's sort of a supplement or a similar effort as Sunday Assembly. I think it's a great idea. Why not? Absolutely do it. Yes, big fan of Greta's.
Let's move on and do the next story, Nicole.
A hairy struggle. The U.S. military faces a legal struggle that has grown quite hairy, literally. The case under consideration has landmark potential, according to Eric Baxter, senior counsel at the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty, representing a Sikh army captain by the name of Simratapal Singh in a controversy over hairstyles and the boundaries of religious liberty. His counsel Baxter remarks that getting court order against the army is huge. It's almost never happened. A recently filed federal lawsuit addresses the issue of the Army's stringent grooming standards and how these standards intersect with religious liberty. The Sikhs worship a sole formless Lord as a supreme being according to the writings of high-ranking gurus. Among the prohibitions of that faith, there is a vow to never remove hair from any part of one's body as a part of an act of acceptance towards God's will. Captain Singh risked displeasure of his deity upon his entry to West Point in 2006. At that time, he applied for an exemption for his religiously mandated beard, but did not receive one. He shaved at this time, but later decided to campaign for a permanent exemption. Captain Singh is a Bronze Star recipient and risked his life removing roadside bombs in Afghanistan. "I'm proud to fight for my country, which includes fighting to protect others' religious beliefs," Singh said, after receiving a temporary accommodation. So far, 100 members of Congress have supported permanent accommodations for Sikh grooming habits, but the U.S. Army is slow to change, despite having granted such exemptions for Sikhs in non-combat positions.
And we're back.
Alrighty. So the last show that we did before our hiatus, way back in November, we had a gentleman also named Eric on the show who argued that religious exemptions of this sort are ridiculous and should never be even offered. If there's a uniform code, it's a uniform code, and everybody should have to follow it. And I kind of took issue with it. And at the time, I didn't think of this particular argument. So I want to make this argument right now. If I was to take a job and I was married and I wore a wedding ring, and the job said just for uniform reasons, not for health, not for safety reasons, not for any other reasons, but for uniform reasons only, I wasn't allowed to wear my wedding ring. And I refused to remove my wedding ring because I just felt that I had made a promise to my wife that I would keep that on, and I was going to keep it on. And I was to fight against that uniform code. To me, a lot of atheists would understand that. And they would say, well, yeah, it's a uniform code, but that's no reason why you should force somebody to take their wedding ring off. A Sikh's beard, or a Muslim woman's hijab, or a nun's habit, if a nun is working in the private sector, to me, it's the same thing. Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm here. It's a slippery slope, of course, but I think the government has the right idea, the federal government, and that is that if there's no harm done, and it represents a small portion of the population, the key thing here is there harm? If the number of exemptions, the number of unique cultural identity issues are millions. So to impose a Donald Trump sort of arbitrary, this is the way we are, therefore this is the way you shall be, is insulting. Mm-hmm. It's not necessary. It's not necessary because we're a blending, melting pot, etc. It's a big country, and our diversity is one of our strengths. So if the diversity is a beard or a turban, okay, because you know what? I'm from the country. Sometimes my boots are dirty. So am I going to be banned? Well, I might be for good reason. Yeah. But but the point is that that's the way I dress. I wear a baseball cap quite regularly to hide up the hair, by the way. But so what? That's just a bit of culture. Leave it alone. It's arbitrary. The arbitrary assignment of our norms is just that. It's arbitrary. It's three old white guys saying, you know what? No, man, we're gonna put a hat on so you don't see I don't have any hair. Right. Come on, you can't do that. Well, that's to me putting an arbitrary set of dogmatic rules in place that don't represent cultural allowances, and I think that's wrong. That's insulting, and I think people, Sikhs in particular, should be offended by that, and so should they. Right. But if there's no harm, no foul, then fine. Now, there is an issue around the niqab, etc., that's a cultural thing that a lot of people find offensive. You can talk to David Rand in Quebec, and He's got some very strong opinions on the subject. So there's lots of Canadians that are offended by this. So we have to decide, is that one that we want to push, or is that something to be allowed? But don't forget the percentage of people that do that. It's so small. Is it going to culturally destroy Canada because 1.1% or 0.11% of our people want to do this, what we find unacceptable? Well, no, it's not going to kill us. It's not going to be destroying our culture. So leave it alone.
Yeah. Plus, I think
it's a battle that's been fought in Canada. Whether Sikhs would be allowed to wear their turban and their beard back in the 80s when some people wanted to be in the RCMP.
Yes.
And then after that, it's the same battle has been fought in the army, and our Minister of Defense. There's a beautiful picture of him when he was a soldier, and he's wearing proudly his beard and his turban. And guess what? It didn't prevent him from being a badass soldier. He's got lots of medals to prove it.
No, well, he's a hell of a Canadian.
Right. If you look at any military images from the 1860s, they all had beards.
Yeah. So there you go. Now the country's trashed. Yeah, we're gonna have to build a wall.
Right. There's nothing that says the military. There's nothing unique about unique to the military that says beards can't be uniform. Or it's historically, the Greeks, the Romans, they all had beards. Nobody thought that that they didn't look, imposing. So what's the point?
And I guess I go back to my marketing perspective, and that is that if we are narrow-minded enough to think that Canadians are going to be offended or indoctrinated because of the representation of somebody's cultural history, then we need to grow up a little bit and find an internet connection. Because it's just not the case. It's it's a vestige of culture, and great for you, good for you. As I said, my boots are dirty quite regularly.
All right. Yep. Okay, well, let's go ahead and do the third story, which is a little bit closer to what we were talking about at the beginning of the show.
School board praise. Christian board members of the Chino Valley School District in Southern California are tired of being persecuted by First Amendment fundamentalists. For many years, these devout souls have done no more than their Christian duty in their capacity as civil servants at public board meetings, including leading Christian prayers, quoting extensively from the Psalms, and urging those who do not know Christ to go and find Him. In late 2013, prompted by complaints of parents, the Freedom from Religion Foundation urged the board to cease these practices. The board held its ground, rejecting the FFRF's repeated requests. A year later, the Freedom from Religion Foundation sought help from Jesus, who was very obliging, ordering the school board to desist. That is, Jesus Barnell, U.S. District Judge, who last month wrote a dismissively short ruling against the board. This is no time for turning the other cheek. The school board has voted to challenge the ruling, citing their own First Amendment rights to practice their religion and pointing to the invocations and prayers that regularly open various government meetings, such as congressional sessions. Meanwhile, the district is working to train more Christian soldiers to fight against the militant supporters of the Establishment Clause, offering as part of the curriculum an elective class on the Bible as history and literature, in which one of the topics of discussion is the literal fulfillment of prophecy. The other Jesus, in spite of numerous attempts at contact, could not be reached for comment.
And we're back.
And
it
it
we've
is
got some new writers lately on the show, and
Yeah.
I guess it shows.
Yeah, that's a little bit tongue in cheek. It almost was written from the wrong perspective, but you get it. But it's still. But yeah, it was a good story. I like the way it was written. There was a comment on one of the stories last week. One of the episodes last week, 3 of the stories were stories written by me, and then there was a 4th story that wasn't written by me. I don't know who. And one of the commenters said, "Whoever writes these stories has a great sense of humor." And as I saw the comment before I saw all 4 stories, and I thought, "Oh, I guess I said something funny in here." And then I saw it, and it was the 4th story that was the funny one. So,
Yeah. Well, I agree, David.
Yeah, I agree. David doesn't have a sense of humor.
I have no sense of humor now.
So is the issue at hand prayer in council?
The issue in hand is just, to me, is the idea in general that you still have. Well, actually, I think that's a school board, not a city council, and it's just the idea that we still to this day have people who don't understand, or just refuse to acknowledge the validity of a 1963 Supreme Court ruling.
And of course, the Canadian Supreme Court ruling from last year.
Yeah, they just refuse to acknowledge it. It's like it doesn't exist. It doesn't apply to them. And really, there's no reason to do it other than to be a bully. That's the only reason to do it.
Yeah, when it's a sense of entitlement as well, David.
Mm-hmm.
That's the way it's always been.
I think the students are the ones who are going to suffer in all this because a lot of money is going to be wasted in court. And the schools are themselves, the children are going to suffer because they're going to lose.
Yeah, they're going to lose.
They have, and here, certainly in Canada, they have lost. Mm-hmm. It's a done deal here.
Yeah, well, it's a done deal here too. I'm in the United States, and it's a done deal here too. Except they keep fighting the fight, and they lose every time. But
so, what's your thoughts on how you move forward from where you are today, and the fact that it is a slam dunk, it's a done deal? But how do you move forward?
Yeah, I don't know. The way it's been handled so far by groups like the FFRF and the American Civil Liberties Union and other groups like the American Atheists and stuff like that is they've been taking it on one fight at a time. Yeah, and we get the same pushback every time. We need to educate people that when these groups come in, they're not coming in on their own. They're coming in because somebody local, somebody in the community invited them in.
Yes.
That's the way it is every single time. Then they always say, why is this group from Wisconsin or why is this group from California coming in and telling us how to run? It's not somebody from California. You're part of the country, and your local community is the person who's saying it may not want to be known that they're the one saying it, but so they go anonymously and ask the FFRF to fight the fight for them. But it's still a local person.
But it is perhaps the way to deal with that is that as secular humanism becomes more pervasive, becomes more common, then folks are not going to be shy to stand up. Mm-hmm. And they have the law and they have the history, both in your country and this one, behind them. So I think the solution is for organizations like Humanist Canada or the American Humanist Association to stand up and expand their impact, whether it's through conferences or the internet, and let people know that you have this right. And here's the history, here's the legalities of the issue. We have this issue here, David, with the Supreme Court decision. What could be more obvious? Right. And we still have people around the country saying, well, we're going to do it anyway. Yeah. Okay, but what part of the Supreme Court of frickin' Canada don't you understand? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I see. So I guess we better stop. Yes, you better stop. So the policing, there is no atheist police jihadists that run around and blow up podiums at council meetings or at school board meetings. But you know what? They're going away. Mm-hmm. One of the realities here is the demographics of leadership in that, unfortunately, a lot of those organizations are led by old white guys. And the percentage of religious folks amongst old white guys is quite a bit higher than it is with the rest of the world. Fortunately, we are dying off. So in 20 I'm going to live forever. In 20 or 30 years, we will all be very old. But the new demographic will take over and realize that, you know what, the Supreme Court of Canada has decided. So, three old white guys running a group meeting in rural Ontario, not so much anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just not, it will go away, but we don't need a police force. We just need the demographics to catch up, and it will happen for sure. Right. In the meantime, we can be attentive and point out the obvious, as David said, in 1963. Well, there you go.
Yep.
So we're good.
Yep, we're good. We're good to go. Okay. All right, Nicole, you have Christian glitches for us this week?
Yes. And folks,
And it's on topic too. It's on topic too.
yes. And the thing is, until about an hour before the show, I had no Christian glitches. And then God spoke to me and said, check this.
Jim, this is going back to the spiritual uprising.
Yeah.
Who is telling us that we can't say Merry Christmas?
They.
They. Why are we obeying them, Jim? Why? Why are we obeying them? Every time there's let's say a high school, you're talking about a high school graduation and you can't pray. Who says you can't pray? A stupid judge 500 miles away in a courthouse says you can't pray?
And an atheist who has taken it before the judge.
Yes. So what happens if in that graduation, most of the parents stand up and recite the Lord's Prayer? What are they going to do? The judge going to come over and arrest you?
That's a good idea.
Let's get an uprising going. Jim, if
They would threaten to arrest you, threaten to mow you down with a machine gun.
Well, what if they did? They're going to come in and shoot 500 parents at a high school graduation for saying the Lord's Prayer?
Not right now, but eventually they will.
If we don't stop it. And the way to stop it is to stop obeying them.
And we're back. So
Civil disobedience works
pray in
both ways.
public. I'm sorry?
Civil disobedience works both ways.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. And the other thing is that the nature of civil disobedience is education.
Mm-hmm.
More and more people realize that those things are not important anymore.
Right.
They just go away.
I know religious people who object to things like school prayer and because really the Satanists are doing a very good job of illustrating this point recently, where every time that somebody opens up something like council meetings to open prayer, the Satanists are there saying, okay, we want to do it. And they go, okay, maybe nobody should pray.
Yes. And then, my favorite is, which prayer are we going to use?
Yeah, exactly. Because that's the whole problem with it is that as soon as you open it up, you've opened it up. But the hypocrisy of it is just mind blowing. Like this character talking about how if the parents were to get up and pray, the police would come and mow them down. No, the police would not come and mow them down. There's no atheist jihadists as far as I know. Yeah, exactly. It's just Instead, the school board would be sued.
Yeah. And it takes only a quick threat of a trip to court, and it shuts it down. Mm-hmm. Here in Ontario, the Abrahamic Christian version, okay, that's been quite common, but not so much anymore. Which religion we're going to use? I'm thinking we're not going to use one. Thank you.
Yep, that's the problem. And so, as long as, and it's always, this is something that I've observed before on the show. Anytime there is a minority, no matter who the minority is, they want secularism. It's only majorities that want to impose a particular brand of religion. So the Christians in the United States and Canada are upset that they don't get to be, they don't get to push their religion. But the Christians in Egypt are very happy that there are laws protecting them from Islam being imposed on them.
Yes, and that takes me all across to the issue of blasphemy. And in this country, we still have a blasphemy law. You don't in the United States. In Canada, you can go to prison for up to 2 years for blasphemy. The law hasn't been used since the 1930s, but we have a petition waiting for an MP sponsor to put it in front of our federal parliament that says get rid of this law. Saudi Arabia has said, we have a blasphemy law. They kind of take theirs pretty seriously. Mm-hmm. In Canada, not so much. We don't take it seriously. But Saudi Arabia has said you have one. So therefore, you're as bad as we are. Well, we're not quite as bad, but right. Yeah, we still have the law. Right. Anybody I've talked to about it says, what the hell do we have one of those?
Did you hear about Bill 59 in Quebec?
Mm-hmm.
That's
absolutely.
It's not quite blasphemy law, but it's getting close, and some of the Muslim groups are trying to push it forward so that to the point where it will become a blasphemy law.
And that's terrible. I mean, the International Coalition Against Blasphemy Law has launched literally in a week, maybe 2 weeks, in the spring of last year, with Eric Adrians out of CFI and Eric Thomas out of Humanist Canada. And check this out: New Zealand, Iceland, Greece, Ireland, the United Nations. It goes on and on. There's over 200 people now that have signed on to say the International Coalition Against Blasphemy Law, headed by the IHEU out of London. So the internet's a wonderful thing, and it can do it in an awful hurry. So there should be no more blasphemy laws. Mm-hmm. Get rid of them. And starting in this country, as soon as we get an MP sponsor, we have the signatures here in Canada to do this thing. We'd love to have an MP sponsor to come forward and say, yes, we'll put this in front of the Canadian Parliament. And then Saudi Arabia won't be able to claim anymore that there are other countries like Canada that have one of these things. So let's get rid of it.
Maybe you could get the French-Canadian guy out of Ottawa, the one who's dying from ALS, from Lou Gehrig's disease.
That would be a very good idea. I'll put it on the list. Thank you.
Because right now, not too many people in Parliament are willing to refuse him anything.
Well, at this point, I would be shameless and take anybody. We would recently approach the Bloc Québécois to help us out. So who knows?
No, he's a liberal.
Yes, I know.
Bloc Québécois. He's a liberal.
Yeah. Our Parliament is becoming representative of Canada, for crying out loud. Look at the subtlety. I watched the swearing-in ceremonies and saw how many people actually used the Bible and swore on the Bible. Mm-hmm. Less than half.
Yeah. And just for the American audience who may only get their news from us, which I'm sure there's only like 4 of those, Canada, since our last show, Canada has elected a new Liberal Prime Minister. I don't think he was Prime Minister, but when we did our last show.
Well, and he is the most inclusive Prime Minister we have ever had.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was asked how come he had, half his cabinet was made up of women, he said, because it's 2015.
Yeah.
Period. And you know what? That is becoming a mantra. The year, I've used it several times in the last couple of months when people have said to me, why would you go to a church to get into the pulpit? Well, because it's 2016. Mm-hmm. And people understand that. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful mantra, and we should make a bumper sticker. Yeah. It said, why are atheists being acknowledged in the United States and in Canada? Why is secular humanism a thing? Why are the Nuns in the United States such a powerful group? Well, the answer is because it's 2016.
Right. I don't know if you ever there's a show down here that's hosted by a Canadian girl named Samantha Bee. You ever heard of her?
Yes. Yes.
She has a new show on TBS, and she did a story on David Silverman at CPAC.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and that was very, very interesting. Atheists are doing outreach.
Absolutely. Yes. You know what, David, you laugh, but I was at my local meeting here in Eastern Ontario, literally last Sunday. We're doing atheist outreach. We're going to the libraries around our neighborhood, and it'll be outreach. It'll be, what the heck are we all about? Well, because it's 2016. Why not?
2016. I remember a couple of years ago, they started at a lot of the universities, they started Ask an Atheist Day.
Sure.
Which I thought was great. Yeah, just let you know we're here. Or
why not? Yeah. Why not? Only us 3 have 2 heads and a satanic intent. So,
as I like to say, we're here. We're freer. Get used to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Who doesn't have a sense of humor, Nicole? Okay.
Did you hear me groan?
Yeah. Yeah. But anyway, something that you brought up earlier that I wanted to touch on before the show was over. I wanted to talk a little bit about the situation in Brussels. And the point that I wanted to make about Brussels is that it wasn't that long ago in the grand scheme of things that Christians were burning witches at the stake. Before that, they were having inquisitions. They were invading the Holy Land and capturing countries, and so it's not as if Christianity can make this claim that they have never been like Islam is today, and Christianity changed. There's very little of that in Christianity anymore. There's still some of it in Hinduism, but not as much. There's very little of it, almost none of it in Buddhism, except for in Myanmar. But Islam today is this isolated ball of hate and animosity that the world looks at as something that's part of what Islam is. And not only is it not all of Islam, which we all know, like there's countries like Indonesia, and there's Canadian Muslims and American Muslims who are like Dearborn is nothing like Saudi Arabia, for example. So it will change over time. Islam will change as it matures and become what Buddhism is, become what Christianity is. Right now, it has this one vestige of horrible tribalism called ISIS and Al Qaeda, and they're engaged in the same kind of things that Christianity used to be engaged in. We really need as atheists to not allow ourselves to buy into the idea that Islam is monolithic or that it's intractable. Because given time, it'll do the same thing that Christianity did, and it will mature.
And the word you were looking for is intransigent.
Intransigent. That might be the word I was looking for.
I completely and wholeheartedly agree. And I would also like to add that the key in my mind is that the answer is education, and specifically education of people who are somewhat illiterate today. But then let's add another component to this puzzle, and that is the expansion of civil rights, and in specifically women's rights in those countries. That Islam tends to put their women as second-class citizens in a lot of ways. And certainly the fundamentalist group put their women in second-class citizen status. And that
Christianity has the same history.
Yes. Yes, so let's educate and pass the mantra of education around the world, and that will change this fundamentalist ridiculousness.
Exactly. So, okay, tell us a little bit, like how people can get involved with Humanist Canada, and any contact information that you might have for them.
Sure. There's a couple of things we can do. The first is local, and there's lots of local groups. The website is hard to remember, humanistcanada.ca. Go there. We run a news ticker. We have events and news items that people can see what it is we're doing. That's a great way to do it. That's probably the primary thing that I would like to push is humanistcanada.ca. There's a 1-800 number that's got my voice at the end of it a lot of times, but there's a lot of resources. And then there's also a lot of local resources where we'll steer people. As I said, as a national organization, we don't run things locally, and it's pretty tough for us to hold a meeting where we don't have a group. But there's literally hundreds and hundreds of groups around the country. humanistcanada.ca is a good place to find them, and that's the main thing we want to do. Okay. That's the absolute best resource. And the conferences that are held around the country, including Imagine No Religion, where over 50% of the people come from the United States to visit us, and probably that percentage of our speakers are as well. That's a great place to start.
Will you have a presence at the Reason Rally?
We will not. We will through our Kumbayana group hug with the American Humanist Association. but we won't be at the Reason Rally. We'll actually be in Vancouver at the Imagine No Religion conference.
Oh, is that the same time?
It's actually 2 weeks ahead of it, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. May 20th is the Vancouver conference.
Yeah, June 4th is Reason Rally.
Yeah, Reason Fest, or yes, the Reason Rally is 2 weeks later. So we won't be there this year as Humanist Canada. Probably will be next year, hopefully.
Are they doing another one next year?
I would imagine. I certainly hope so.
Well, they it's been like 3 years since they did the last one.
It's been 3 years, yes. So I guess I don't have an intelligent answer to that question.
Okay. But you'll hopefully be at the next one, whenever it may be.
That's hopefully, yes.
Yeah, yes, okay. So Nicole, do you have anything coming up on your channel?
Nope.
Nope.
Yes. I've got presentation, an interview with Lawrence Strauss. He was interviewed last Saturday at CFI Canada, and I happen to be the one who filmed the whole thing. So
Lawrence Strauss or Lawrence Krauss?
Krauss,
yes.
Sorry.
He's a good friend of all humanists, that's for sure. And he hurts my brain.
Yeah. He makes my thinks hurt.
Yes, good point. Yes.
So soon there will be an interview with Lawrence Krauss on my channel.
Cool. Okay.
Very cool.
That'll be everything then, right?
Yep.
Okay, so that's all for today. Please make sure that you subscribe to the Atheism TV channel. There you can watch the Infidel News for the Damned, where our talented team of writers and anchors present these and other stories not normally covered in the media. In the coming week, the Infidel will rerun today's stories and many more fascinating ones. You'll find Atheism TV at youtube.com/atheismtv. The Infidel Podcast of the Damned is a Nicole SD production. Nicole and I would like to recognize and say thank you to Truth Surge, who did the voiceover used in our intro and gave us permission to use music from his song Lied To as our opening theme. We'd also like to thank Eric for participating in today's podcast. Nicole's channel is Nicole SD and can be found at youtube.com/NICOLSD. I'm Gamut Man on YouTube, at Gamut Man on Twitter, and my blog and information on my books, including my nonfiction title, Believe It, You Know, an Atheist, as well as my mystery novels featuring the atheist detective Lupa Schwartz, can be accessed at tinyurl.com/lupalanding. While there, you can sign up to receive my newsletter. Signing up entitles you to choose one free ebook title from my collection of 99-cent novellas. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.